Welcome back to Between the Before and After, a podcast about the stories that shape us. I'm your host, Coach John McLaren, and each episode I bring you an inspiring guest with a moving story that shines a light on the power of the human spirit. I'm excited to share this story with you, so let's dive in. All right, welcome to the show. How would your life be different if you lost 125 pounds? I imagine it would be pretty significantly different. And so we're going to chat with Coach Dominic today and learn a little bit more about his story. So welcome to the show, Dom.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me.
I always like to just get into where are you at presently? What are you doing? And a little bit of your present backstory, and then we're going to figure out how you got here.
So what am I doing currently? I right now I have a health coaching business that I run. I have a handful of clients that I keep part-time, and then full-time I am teaching a master health coaching course for precision nutrition, helping people prep and get ready to take the national board certification for health and wellness.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at professionally.
Yeah, it's like that, and I should mention, like, that's kind of how we became acquainted, was through precision nutrition, and you helped me through this process as well, which I greatly appreciate. But I also admired your story, so I wanted to explore that a little bit more. What else is going on?
So just I'm 45. I'm trying to keep active and keep busy. I have kids. I have two children. My son is 12. My daughter's 8. They both do their Ninja Warrior thing. They participate in Ninja Warrior. They both qualified for Worlds in a couple of different leagues. And my daughter just started wrestling, so I coach girls youth wrestling, which is really fun, actually.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's really cool seeing these little girls wrestle. They're tenacious, some of them.
I believe it.
It's more entertaining actually than watching some of the boys. So I spend my time doing that. I'm entertain myself doing jujitsu and lifting weights, and I have a rock gym that I built for my kids and myself in the basement. So I do a lot of rock climbing as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so keep busy physically. I try to stay very physically active. Not because I have to, but it's stuff that I truly enjoy, especially these days. So
yeah,
no more
so you're
rugby,
balancing
though.
a lot of things. Oh yeah, rugby kind of beats up on you a little bit.
Yeah. So this past year was my 20th season. So I officially hung up the boots, minus some fun things I'll do with a team of guys. We're called the Dad Squad. We're all older guys with kids. So we'll go enter some tournaments, and people don't like us because we don't practice and we win.
It just, experience and veteran savvy.
It's exactly what it is. That's why it's the Dad Squad.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think, coaching, I actually don't think it would have. I grew up in a small town, so I was like, I don't think we even had a girls wrestling team growing up. We had a very small wrestling team to begin with. So
it's a new girls wrestling is the largest growing sport in the world right now. It's got in lots of states in the United States. It's become a sanctioned sport. So there's money for scholarships in college for wrestling, and it's a varsity sport in a lot of high school levels for girls as well. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's fantastic for them to also just to discover their physical strength and what they can do. And have you coached like boys as well, or only ever been?
No, not formally. This was kind of like I was sitting up there for practice watching them, and it's like I can I can help here. I have a hard time sitting still doing nothing. So I'm there, and like I don't want to be on my phone for 2 hours. So I've decided to start coaching, and they need it. I mean, there's 30 girls on the team, so they need the help sometimes.
Yeah. Do you have I know you mentioned you do BJJ. Do you have a wrestling background, or is it just there's a lot of BJJ that translates over into wrestling?
Yeah, so I wrestled in 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. I was not physically fit then. And the weight classes that I happened to land in were weight classes where like just the killers were, right? So I would get smashed every week for 4 years in a row, right? I was a skinny fat kid at the time. Just not, I was a late bloomer, I would say. Wasn't so. I showed up, I worked hard, but I got absolutely crushed for all those years. So it's a little different now. So a lot of that just kind of body awareness and some of the movement and stuff there is there, and it's applicable for jiu-jitsu, especially like if we're doing, I just did a tournament this past weekend, and like in the no-gi category, takedowns are easy for me, right? It's because that's something I trained for all those years. So it's totally different. But that itch came as I was sitting there watching my kids do wrestling and stuff. I'm like, yeah, I miss this. I'm like, let me come back to that. I'm like, how can I do this? And it was like, oh, jiu-jitsu.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So how old were you when you took up jiu-jitsu?
It's only been a few months. It's like I said, it's my retirement sport. So that's why I retired from rugby. I tell people that and they look at me like, what? And it's like, yeah, jiu-jitsu is a lot easier on my body than rugby is. Because I'm not running full speed into another, man who's, twice my body weight running full speed. Right? Like none of those collisions are there. There's no random leg flying around that I've got to worry about hitting my knee from the side or anything like that. So it's a little bit more controlled.
Yeah. That's fantastic. So I'm curious kind of a little bit about the backstory. Where did you said you were a skinny fat kid, kind of growing up, and you wrestled. Where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Cleveland, and before, I don't know, I was probably a couple of months old. My father moved to Tucson, Arizona. Okay. So I lived in Tucson, Arizona. Yeah. I went from, the snow belt to the desert. I grew up right in Tucson I was in Tucson for 11 years. And then we lived in Las Cruces, New Mexico for 2 years. And then we moved back home, to Cleveland. But, childhood out there was in the 80s pretty fun.
Okay. Well, I was like, man, New Mexico, with like no internet and like, and hardly any people. Like, I don't even know what the population, and I'm sort of expressing my ignorance. I mean, I've been to Arizona, but I haven't been to New Mexico. I'm like, man, it seems like there's just not a lot of people there, and there's not a lot like grows and lives there, but maybe I'm mistaken. Yeah,
where we were was it was a decent sized little city. I mean, it's kind of grown up a little bit. It's not a massive city, but that was, it's pretty close to El Paso, so it's almost like a border town. It's about 35 minutes from El Paso, Texas. And so that was an interesting experience being in New Mexico, where it actually, I look at it now, and it's just like a lot of things in my life. I look at it, I'm very grateful and happy that they happened. They taught me a lot. So in that space, it was a predominantly Hispanic school. So I got to see what it felt like being a minority in the school, essentially. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was interesting, especially when most of the kids speak Spanish, and the only things I understood was when they were swearing at me. Right?
Fair enough. Did you end up picking up some Spanish as a byproduct?
Yeah, a little bit.
Out of necessity.
Yeah, and Tucson was fun as a kid. Like I said, we were in the foothills of the Catalina Mountains, and being in the 80s, I was a latchkey kid since I was in like 4th grade. Because I was raised by my dad. My dad was a single parent for many of the years that we were out there. He'd been remarried and then divorced, and so I spent a lot of time on my own. Just kind of like riding my bike through the desert, or just out wandering around in the desert, catching lizards and tarantulas and stuff. It was, like I said, for a little boy, it was a pretty cool time and a place to be growing up.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Just this idea of like, riding my bike around the desert. I'm like, man, I would have fried because I'm like,
it was hot. Yeah, it was hot. Tucson is man, it was super hot. But I say this all the time, and people, I say it's a dry heat. People are like, no, hot's hot. I'm like, no, it really is a big difference, right? You don't know that you're sweating because it evaporates so fast. And if you go in the shade, it's 30 to 40 degrees cooler. Because there's no humidity, right? It's just straight sun. So if you get in the shade, you're cool.
Yeah. That is a big difference. I mean, my in-laws lived in Queensland, which is northeastern Australia, which is the tropical part, and I live in Canada, as you know, and to fly from like Canadian winter to tropical Queensland, literally like over 24-hour span, is like a shock to the system, and it gets insane. It would get insanely hot up there, like in Celsius, like you're in the mid 40s sometimes, which is 100 and 110 kind of thing. But the humidity is like 100%. Like it feels like you just walk into this wall of steam, and you're like, "How do I breathe this air?" It feels like I'm like hot moisture burning my lungs.
Suffocating. So
yeah. So I think a dry heat is it's like a sauna. You get it like a free sauna.
Right. The desert is not like that. Like the desert is not like it's not humid. There's no humidity there at all. So it was interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's so. You said I was raised by my dad, so I spent a lot of time alone, and I think that part of that is part of what started kind of for lack of better terms, the deterioration of my physical health, if you will. He worked a lot, he worked late, and he was doing the best he could as a single dad, and it would be like we'd eat fast food at 9-10 o'clock at night sometimes. But I would be by myself most of the time. Like there'd be days like, like grilled cheese sandwich, and then I'd make like 3 or 4 of them. Right. Like that was, there was no one there to tell me no. I had those, interestingly enough, I developed those cooking skills back then when I was young, but maybe not in the best things then.
It was just a matter of survival.
It was a start. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have any siblings with you?
No, not at the time. So this is an interesting thing. I'm technically an only child.
Mm-hmm.
But for a long time, so my dad had remarried, and I was the youngest of 3. My stepbrother and stepsister are older. I always just call them my brother and sister. So we had that dynamic going, and then they got divorced, and then I was kind of back on my own for a while. And in high school, my father got remarried, and so I'm still now the oldest of 3. So I'm an only child. I've been the youngest of 3 and the oldest of 3. Right? And there's lots of like big dichotomies in my life. Right? I lived in the desert and I lived in the snow belt.
Yeah, no kidding. Do you maintain relations with your step siblings to some degree?
I do. So my younger 2 brothers, like we talk all the time, awesome. And then the older 2, I talk with my older sister a little bit more frequently than the brother.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. And so you started with grilled cheese sandwiches and fast food, and that was kind of how
mac and cheese, scrambled eggs and bacon, grilled cheese sandwiches. Those were and can't forget quesadillas. Lots of quesadillas.
Right. Yeah. Not hearing a lot of vegetables in there.
Not back then. No.
Yeah. But you got into wrestling eventually. Did you play any other sports?
Yeah, so I didn't actually play sports until 8th grade. That was when we moved back home to Cleveland. Mm-hmm. And it was like, okay, I'll try this out. Because for all those younger years, my dad would like take me to like the Pee Wee football, and I was too big. I'm like, I'm not losing 10 pounds. Like that was my attitude then as a kid. Like I'm not going on a diet to play football. No. Right. Because I was bigger than the weight limit.
Okay. There's a weight limit in Pee Wee football.
Yeah. For certain ages. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess like, maybe for this age, the weight limit caps here. This age, the weight limit caps here. Yeah.
Okay.
So I never played sports until 8th grade, or organized sports. We played a lot of like backyard football and that kind of stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
And then eighth grade, I wrestled. I also played football, and I did track. And track was, I was not good either. I threw shot and discus. And again, like I said, I was not a muscular kid I grew into. So that wasn't super great. Football was good though. Football, I found kind of my home. I did well there. I played football through high school. I played my freshman year of college.
Yeah.
And I wrestled for those couple years in high school as well. And I didn't do any other sports in high school.
Yeah.
But even then in football, I played defensive line and offensive line. Right. And I'm not very tall. That was just,
so you need that weight.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, you think about the D line and the O line in football, and these guys are all, probably majority of them are over 300 pounds.
Well, I mean, yeah, offensive linemen are going to be heavier. Defensive linemen are getting heavier and heavier now too. But I'd say like 260 is probably like a light minimum these days.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I always thought it would be very interesting to see if you could get a bunch of sumo wrestlers and put them on like a defensive line or offensive line and see how they do, because they they more or less charge and smash at each other with no padding and things like that. So I thought that might be a kind of like a fun experiment, but I don't know if it'd go that well.
Yeah, a sumo wrestler on the offensive line would do very, very well, because they know how to right. Their sport by nature is keeping them from getting pushed out of the circle. So
right.
That's an interesting experiment.
Yeah, see if you can get some sumo wrestlers playing American football. That would be I'd like to see that. I'd pay to see that at least a few times.
Why not?
So then, and then did you head off to college? You said you played football for a year in college.
I played football a year in college. I was I was okay. Like I was still a little overweight going into college, playing that first year. But by the end of my first year of college, like I had ballooned up pretty big, especially then once I stopped, because I was like just drinking and staying up late and eating fast food a lot. Right. So not really taking care of myself then either. Mm-hmm. That's when things started kind of really going downhill. If you will.
Yeah. I mean, and for you, was like the food and the alcohol just like a comfort sort of thing, pattern from like childhood, or just what you did, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of deep stuff in there, I think. There's probably, I definitely spent a lot of time, I was always kind of like, I would describe myself to people as like, if you've ever seen the movie Tommy Boy, like that's how I was.
Okay.
I was the center of the party. Like I was always fun and, like doing wild things and like, loud and probably a little bit brash and like just and a lot of that came from like, hey, this is kind of like the sad clown, right? Like I felt bad and depressed and upset about a lot of things. It was like, so I'm going to try to make myself happy. In a lot of ways, it was like, well, if I keep other people entertained, then they're not going to notice who I am and they're not going to pick on me. Cause I could tell you when I was in New Mexico, I got picked on quite a bit.
Right.
I was a chubby, nerdy white kid. Like my dad would, like, if I broke my glasses, my dad would just literally put tape on them. Right. Like the typical, stereotypical, right. Like have tape on the side here, tape over there, like, I didn't have the fancy shoes that everyone else had, it was just, so that a lot of that was started accumulating at that point, especially at that age, right? That's a tough age.
Yeah. I remember playing the jolly fat guy for a number of years, and in my case, it was just like a compensation, I think, mechanism. If I'm going to be big, I might as well have like a big personality and whatnot, and I can kind of use it to encourage others to engage in the behaviors I'm engaging in.
Exactly.
I don't feel like alone in
it. Like I would be the guy, like I had a beer bong that we called the Widowmaker. I was so proud of this back then too, because you could put a 6-pack in it, and like, so like one of the things I was proud of, and I would win bets and stuff. Like I could bong 6 beers faster than most people could do one. So
That's
like
insane.
It's like, here goes a 6-pack, but that was part of it, right? Like you said, like
Yeah.
that big personality, like, you know, like, hey, let's go to this party or whatever. And it was kind of like that. So I mean, I did like some ridiculous things. Like I would order a large pizza and ask them not to cut it, right? So I could roll it up like a taquito and just eat it. You know what I mean?
That was exactly what I was picturing you'd do if they weren't cutting it. Yeah, is roll it up like that. That's crazy. Did you ever eat? I guess not competitively, like professionally, but did you ever like engage in any kind of eating competitions or anything like that?
No, never went that far. If that was probably a little bit more popular thing back then, I'm sure it would have, right? Because there's always been like that little bit of a competitive edge. That was kind of like the thing with the beer bong. Like, oh, if I'm gonna do this better than you.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, and you kind of, I wonder if you sort of get a reputation in your circle. And I mean, you saw my reaction when I heard you doing this. You can just imagine people witnessing this in like real time. Like their mind is just like, you know, like what am I watching right now?
Right. Right. So there was a lot of debauchery, a lot of just lack of self-care. I think just lack of care about a lot of things at that time for me. My grades weren't great. Very, very different. Like I tell people I didn't start to grow up until I turned 25. Like that's when it started.
Yeah. I think that's actually a really profound thing to say. I mean, I know, you know, it's said that I think the male brain doesn't really reach full emotional maturation until around 28 years of age.
The frontal lobe doesn't close until 25.
Yeah. So like what chance do we have? But at a certain point in time, like, or maybe you sort of, pardon the pun, but you kind of wrestled with this internally, like this sort of behavior, like there's this awareness, like, I don't know how to stop this train. Like, I don't like what I'm doing, but I don't know what else to do. Was there any sort of that sort of going on during this time?
Yeah, some of that was in college. Like there was definitely times where I dieted in college. You know, it was weird because when I was in high school, when I wrestled, there were times that I didn't really diet. I just starved myself because I was trying to make the lower weight class because I couldn't beat the guy that was in my weight class. Which is kind of it's terrible, but it's kind of standard behavior in that space for a lot of people. You just don't know any better. But that wasn't a solution to that pain. That started probably in college. A couple of times in college, I remember like first reading about like the Atkins diet, right? And it was yes, like here I am,
97, 98,
right? Yeah, it's like here I am, like this like former offensive lineman who's, you know, pushing, you know, in college, I think the heaviest I got in college was probably like 270. So it's like 260, 270, 270 pounds. You know, it's like, oh, I can eat bacon and sausage and lose weight. So
sign me up.
Right, exactly. I'll never forget sit there at the dinner table the one day, and I had like a pile of bacon, and my roommate just laughing. He's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "There's this diet that you can do, and it's like you don't eat carbohydrates. You're just eating this stuff, and it's supposed to work like magic." I mean, you and I both know how well that worked out.
Oh yeah, like I'm like the appeal of keto is like bacon and cheese, you know, like that's it, you know. And I guess Atkins was just a variation on keto essentially, because I think I remember hearing something like someone was concerned about the carbohydrates in the carrots they were eating, and I was just like, what? Yep. This doesn't compute. It's
going to put me out of ketosis.
Yeah, but I mean, for someone, you know, because I wrestled with emotional eating for quite a number of years as well, and so I'm like, of course, I would totally understand the appeal of that. Like, I can eat all the bacon I want and don't have to worry about vegetables because they have carbs in them. Like, yeah, sign me up.
Yeah. So that didn't really work out. I stuck with that for maybe like a week, because it was like, oh, I can't drink beer. I'm going to go do something else.
Fair enough. Yeah. So all along you're, at a certain point, you've made a couple of efforts. Maybe they haven't gone that well, because you realize, okay, this isn't something I can stick with. What was sort of like rock bottom for you? Or maybe there's more than one. I don't know.
Yeah, there was definitely a few low periods. I'd say the first main one, honestly, was probably when I had graduated. So I graduated from college, and my college girlfriend and I broke up, and I was that wore on me quite a bit. So I think at that point that like the pain of like, okay, here I am now, like bigger than I've ever been. I need to do something about this because I'm sad and I can't just keep doing this.
Right, yeah.
So at that point, I was always interested in like health and fitness and nutrition stuff, like getting like the bodybuilding mags, like Muscle Media 2000. Like I probably owned every single edition for the first couple of years. I loved that stuff.
Yeah.
Didn't live that lifestyle. But then that was when like Bill Phillips and the Body for Life thing first came out, and I did that. And I leaned out pretty good. I mean, I think I got down to maybe 190 pounds or something like that. And I maintained that for, I don't know, maybe 6 months, maybe a year. So that was kind of like my first successful stint.
Yeah.
Into trying to make that approach.
Man, I did Body for Life as well, and that was like the first thing I tried. Exactly. I didn't go down the Atkins route. Yeah.
Exactly. It was a lot, and it was effective for a lot of people at the time. Bill Phillips was a pioneer in that space. In the sense that he gave you a comprehensive plan, made things like weightlifting normal for a lot of people. I had always been in the gym anyway because of football.
Right.
I was lucky that I had coaches and people, I've been lifting weights in some way, shape, or form since I was 14, like regularly.
Right.
In college, not so much. That was more. I was doing 12-ounce curls. So I did the Body for Life thing, and then I put the weight back on. I got a new job. I changed like a couple of jobs. 9/11 happened. I got a job at a Fortune 100 company located here in Cleveland, and I really started to thrive there in my career and grow. And at the same, around then is when I started playing rugby. I found a men's club team. I was still in half decent shape when I first started playing, but over the next couple of years, especially with like the rugby socials, and then just I was getting out a lot at work, putting a lot of time and hours into work and stuff. Like I blew up, and that's when I went over 300 pounds. For the first time. And I was there for several years.
Yeah. And you were, I know a little bit about your background, but I'm trying to think, were you involved in like software or data analytics, something along those lines, or what was it?
Yeah, I was a business systems analyst. So I helped develop, my main role in that, that job was, doing requirements gathering and writing and essentially, helping put together a plan for like what kind of software are we building.
Right. Yeah. And so, and along the way, were there any relationships that you were involved in, or were you single at this time?
Yeah. So around that time, I was dating a couple of different people, including my current wife, who I had known for forever. I met her. So our story is so funny. I met her at a wedding, and her cousin or her sister Her sister married my cousin, and we met at their wedding.
Okay.
So people like her.
Okay.
When we got married, it was like my brother-in-law is like, "Am I your brother-in-law or your cousin? I'm confused." That's what he put on his card.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was, kind of dating around. Like I had on the way to go to a patio bar on a Sunday. We would do this every Sunday when my buddy would travel for work, and when he'd come back, we'd always go out. We were driving by where my wife lived, and I hadn't talked to her in a couple of years. And I just texted her. I said, "Hey, we're going on this thing. Do you want to come and stop by?" And we started hanging out again from there. And so she's been with me since, through all of this stuff. Right.
Yeah.
So she saw me get real big.
Yeah.
And that was, as I was bigger when we got married, but I got real big after. Yeah. That's when I think I said, when I pushed up over 300 pounds.
Yeah. How did she respond to that?
Thinking back, it was tough. I mean, she never said anything. She was never, she was always just never really said anything about it. Never thought about it. But, we certainly had our share of fights and arguments. Most of that was probably me just not feeling good. There was definitely a period of time where I didn't want to be intimate with her because I felt disgusted in myself.
Yeah.
That was definitely a difficult time for her too. Yeah. Right. Like it's like there's something wrong with me. And it's like, no, it's me. Like I'm embarrassed. So that, and mind you, I'm like playing rugby and I'm still being active, doing all of this, trying to at least. But I paid zero attention to my food, zero attention to my sleep, zero attention to my recovery, right? Zero attention to like my mental acuity and my thoughts and where things were.
Just plowing through things like a rugby
wrestler. Yeah. And then like kind of the step forward was like, all right, one year I was like, all right, I'm going to try and get in a little better shape for rugby. Because at that time, like I was so big, like I would play a half and that was it. That's all I could manage. My back would hurt. I'd be out of wind, whatever it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's, and I was doing, my friend had like, I had seen an infomercial, right? One night, it's the irony, and this is the beauty and how they did this. One night after we were out, like it was probably like 2-3 in the morning, I'm sitting on my couch in the basement drunk, and eating Hardee's, so I'm eating like some bacon double cheeseburger, like probably 2 or 3 of them, and a large fry and a milkshake, right? I'm shoving my face with food because I'm drunk and I'm not eating slowly. I'm watching TV and I'm watching this infomercial for like this workout program, like at-home workout program. And I'm watching people talk about fitness. In the back of my mind, I'm like, I would love for this to be me and I'd love to do this again. Like I liked when I did the Body for Life, and how can I make this change? And as I'm eating this food, and so I just was at rugby practice one day. I was talking with one of my buddies, and he's like, "Yeah, I've got those at home." And so he let me borrow those, and I started using them, and I liked it. I was like, "Hey, okay, I feel like I'm getting a little bit fitter. I'm getting a little bit more in shape." It sucked when I first started it. It was probably the worst experience ever. I felt like here I am. I'm supposed to be this strong guy, and I'm like, I can't even do like 5 push-ups. I'm getting crushed. Right.
Right. Yeah.
But I stuck with it. And things changed a little bit, but not a whole lot. So for probably about a good 4 or 5 months or so. And then the big kicker for me happened. We found out that the same day we found out we were having our son, it's the same day that one of my best friends died. He had a pulmonary embolism. Right. So like I get a call in the morning, and it's like my friend who lives and works. He moved out to Colorado Springs, worked for the same company still that I did. And so did one of my other friends. She was out there and she called me. It was like, I'll never forget it. It was like 7:30 in the morning. She's bawling hysterically. I'm like, what is going on? And, and she's just like, he's gone. I'm like, what are you talking about? And then I found out. And then so we had an appointment, right, with the doctor later, my wife and I didn't tell her. I didn't want to ruin her day because she was super excited. We went and it's like pregnant, having a son. It's like awesome. But that was kind of the moment for me going, okay, if I'm going to be a parent, and I've always been a person that, especially like I said, when I was younger, I was pretty brash. And I was like, like kids act up because it's their parents' fault. Like the parents are the ones that do it, right? So, or like whatever it is, it was always the parents' fault, right? That was the way I thought. Didn't have kids, obviously, and all that other stuff. But there is some truth to that. And so for me at that time, it was like, okay, well, I better put my money where my mouth is. Like, if I'm going to be responsible for this kid and I have to be a father, I don't want something to take me away prematurely. I don't want my kid to have to live an unhealthy lifestyle because he sees the example from me doing that. So at that point, that's when it was like, okay, then I started going, well, I should probably pay attention to the food and pay attention to these other things. And through a friend of mine, I was introduced to a guy that happened to be on these infomercials, who his story is very similar to mine. We're the same, similar build, like same background, almost everything. And he lives like an hour and a half away from me. And so he was on the infomercials. He used to travel around with like Tony Horton and like go on QVC and do all that stuff. So So I got in touch. I got in touch with him, and it was kind of like, tell me your story, how things work for you. And it was like, he told me what he was doing and how he did it. And it was like, at that moment, I was kind of like, okay, I'm going to dial in all my stuff. I don't care what happens. I'm going to do the best I can for a year. That was my goal, because it took him a year to lose like 100 pounds. Right. And I become the poster boy for this particular product. So for me, it was like, okay, he can do it. I can do it. I'm going to commit to this for at least a year. And so I did. And so I was doing those at home workouts 6 days a week, paying or to the best of my ability, using the nutrition guide there, learning about food. I kind of went, took some more courses about nutrition. When I was in college, I was pre-med until I did an internship. Where I wanted to be an eye doctor. And I was like, this is like glorified sales. I'm not doing this. And I shifted gears to sociology and business. My junior year, mind you. That didn't,
Bit of catching up to do.
Not the smartest thing, but it was fine. So I had always had an interest in that stuff. So I took some more classes about nutrition and, was really kind of paying attention to that and dialing it in. I used to have like little note cards inside of our pantry, like listing like, these are the portions. And then like, every morning I'd write out like, okay, this is what I'm eating to match the portions that I need. So I would kind of plug and play. Did that for, total ended up being like 18 months. So I ended up going I stopped looking at the scale at 300 pounds. I definitely gained more weight after that, but 300 is the official number that I had. So from the highest officially recorded at 300 to the lowest I had officially recorded in that stint, I got down to 175 pounds.
How tall are you?
I'm 5'6".
Okay.
So not very tall. You can imagine a man that's 5'6", 300 pounds. I was pretty round.
I was going to say a bowling ball. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which works, at some points in rugby were great. Like if we were within the 5 meter line, they would just give me the ball. Like people could just bounce off me. And I'm scoring every time because I'm low and heavy. Like people had a hard time. So that was a fun part. But so being 5'6", 300 pounds, that I didn't realize how much I was just suffering all the time because it had become normal. Right. I didn't know what
That's
feeling
huge.
good felt like. So the normal part was feeling like garbage. I just thought that's how you felt, right? I didn't realize it wasn't normal to like want to fall asleep after you eat something. It wasn't normal to, have your stomach feel so bloated that you have to unbuckle your pants after every meal. Like I just thought that's what people did.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And along the way, kind of going through this program, and your wife is watching this transformation happen. And I guess your son was born by this time. Is that right?
Yeah. So so my son was born partway through the process. I was probably about 100, maybe 190 pounds, 185 pounds. I think I lost another 10 pounds after he was born. Like that's what I actually did. I did like a very strict diet for like a month to be like, let's see how lean I can actually get. Right.
Right. Yeah.
So that was, he was born, she was there, I was doing my thing. And things started to change from there. Right. That's where a lot of things started to shift. Just my mindset, my mentality about life and what I thought was important. I became conscious, if you will, because I wasn't conscious about things in the past. And not just with my own physical health. I'm talking in general, other people, how I treated other people, right? How I made them feel, the things that I did, the things that I thought about, all of that stuff.
That's remarkable. And how did, I mean, obviously, I think your wife was probably quite ecstatic to watch these different changes happen.
Yes and no. So this is a weird time for people, right? So we just had a baby, she was doing all her stuff. She was happy for me that I felt good and was doing stuff. But at the same time, now you introduce this new dynamic where, right. And part of that whole process of me losing this weight is I had to sit down with her one night and I said, look, this is what I want to do. This is why this is important to me. I need your help. We can't keep eating out every night. That was like the conversation I had. We need to start like planning meals and cooking stuff at home. And that was like massive resistance at first for her because that was a big change, right? She had to change too. It wasn't just me. But I did most of the cooking anyway. So once we did that, it was like, if I could get her buy-in on the things that I was going to cook, she was okay with that. But I had to, if I didn't have that conversation, that would have never happened. It never would have worked out.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have.
Yeah.
So she was kind of on board at that point. And then, like I said, once things changed, now the new dynamic is people are noticing me and asking, like, what am I doing? And I'm getting attention from other people that I maybe wouldn't have before. And so that created a lot of friction that we had to work through.
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah. And that was, you sort of preempted the question that I had around this, because when, in a relationship like this, that's a long-term committed relationship, these significant changes happen. Very often there is a shift in the relationship dynamic. And I sort of went through some of this with my wife as well, just learning how to navigate this. And, you said something I think really prescient was like, you needed her buy-in and her support. And I remember just saying to my wife, like, I needed help me in this because, for me, I was basically a binge eating food addict. It was, yeah. And so I was like, I can't do this by myself. And if, we need to change what we do. But you're right. Anytime we introduce friction into a relationship, because of a change, when we've kind of fallen into this is comfortable, this is normal, and so on, like you have to kind of work through that. And I appreciate you being willing to share that. It's really, really important. This idea that, hey, it's not all roses, like going through this process. There's like a new normal that we kind of have to adjust to.
And it's not just us. It's the other people in our lives too.
Yeah.
Right. There was a whole period of time where I used to start, I would get annoyed a little bit where, like, if I would go to a family gathering or function or something and, people would just say random things like, oh, you're healthy, you can't eat this. Or like, right. Or like, I can't believe you're eating that. You're so, like, oh, you should stay away. You don't eat that stuff anyway. Like, you work out all the time. That's why. And it's like, it was all like, That stuff doesn't bother me now. People don't say stuff like that anymore.
Yeah.
But initially, that's how it was, right? You have to realize that your dynamic with all the people in your life is going to change, and it's not easy.
Yeah.
Some people are going to be way more supportive than others.
Yeah. And I know for me, there was a lot of conflict avoidance. And so I would just kind of let food pushers steamroll me a little bit as well, not wanting to introduce friction into the relationship. So I'd be like, okay, well, whatever, I'll just sort of compromise on my values this time because it's easier.
Yeah.
And I think whenever somebody goes through a transformation, there's others who are looking on and observing and watching this process happen, like whether they want to or not, end up kind of reflecting on themselves and going like, well, what am I doing? Here's someone improving themselves and I'm not.
Yeah. And that's another tough one too, right? That's where you get the people that come out and say nasty things, or you get people that are, trying to sabotage you because you're right.
Yeah.
It's like that whole, like, I don't know if it's real or not, but they talk about the crab mentality, right? If one tries to crawl out of the bucket, the other ones are going to pull it back in.
Yeah. I know in South Africa, they used to talk about the PhD mentality. I lived down there for a period of time, and it's the pull him down, pull her down mentality. Someone's trying to rise above the whatever, where we're at. And it's like, well, we don't see that it's possible for us. And so we're going to drag you back into this because we can't visualize that it's possible for us. And so you've been able to maintain a significant portion of this weight loss. Once you went through this transformation, was there any like significant weight regain after that? Or was it like, okay, I'm able to keep this off?
I've kept it off ever since. I had weight fluctuations. I would go up a little bit, but not much. At learning how to shift out of that weight loss mentality and mindset to maintenance, and like, let me focus on my physical abilities and activities. That took a little bit of adjustment. So I think the most I've kicked up to on a regular basis. Well, let me back that up. Over the last 10 years, intentionally around rugby season, I would carry probably an extra 25 to 30 pounds. Right?
Okay.
Just because the position that I played in rugby, I was still good at. It was just small. So I needed to, being 175 pounds and playing the front row is not.
I was going to say,
It doesn't, you don't last there. So
yeah.
I would bounce up to like 200 pounds, maybe 210. But that was always intentional. And then after the season, I would come back down. But overall, so like right now that I'm not playing rugby anymore, I mean, I'm walking around most days about 177 pounds. So I've kept it off entirely that long.
Did that weight regain for like rugby and sort of weight loss, did that ever like trigger anything for you? Like, did it set anything off as you're seeing the number on the scale go up, or you were comfortable with that taking place?
I was comfortable to some extent. Like, I'm doing this on purpose. Like, I knew what I was doing. It wasn't like I was out of control. And I was okay with that. But I tell you, at the end of the season, it was like, I don't like being this heavy. And then I was like, all right, I got to really kind of dial this back in. And it was always a matter of the food, right? And like, and what I was eating, not the exercise. I've always moved.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing I would certainly highlight. People think that you need exercise to lose the fat. And it's like, it helps, but it's not the biggest rock. It's not.
Yeah.
It's great for health and your body shape. But if you just want to lose fat, you got to dial in your food first and then your sleep second.
Yeah. Sleep's huge. I mean, I got a kid, a toddler, and he wakes up 3-4 times a night, and I'm just like, man, there's got to be a time coming in my future where I actually get to sleep a full night. But I think for over 2 years now, like, I haven't had a full night's sleep, and like it does make things more difficult because it makes emotional regulation more difficult. It makes, and along the way, PN or Precision Nutrition came into the picture. How did that just briefly? How did that factor into it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So back in 2011, so I had lost all that weight. I got to my lightest. It was around 2011. I was working. I was doing well at my job. I was constantly being promoted, and was doing really well. And it was work that I liked. Eventually, at some point, though, the work started getting to where they were asking me to do things that I didn't necessarily find my strong suit in, and do less of the things that I was good at. So it's like, wait, you want me to do less of what got me here and more of the things I don't like. So there was that kind of opened the door for me to like, let me see what else is out there. But in that change process, like I said, people started asking me like, what are you doing? And how are you doing this? So it's part of the reason why I went back to school. And took some of those nutrition courses and stuff, and some of the I took a whole boatload of certifications, and I actually started my own little coaching business on the side. So I had, I was training people as a certified trainer. I was a performance enhancement specialist. So I was working with some football athletes and high school and stuff. A bunch of kettlebell certifications. So I was doing a lot of things there. And I was doing the health coaching piece too. So I saw PN was hiring. I was kind of looking for some information. I was scouring the internet for stuff, just constantly learning at that time. And, I learned about precision nutrition and John Berardi. And I was reading their information. And I saw a thing somewhere that they were hiring. I was like, oh, I saw that they had, the job listed, and it was like, oh, I can get health insurance and a full-time salary, coaching, doing this stuff. I'm like, this is great. I did not apply for that first one. And they ended up hiring Brian St. Pierre, which was a super smart move because Brian is amazing and incredibly intelligent. He's an RD. And then as this process went on, I just, as that door opened at work where I was like, hey, maybe I'm going to look at like some other options. I saw it, I was just like, I'm done. I want at least, I saw an opportunity. There was no job posting or anything, but I had kept in touch with, I'd sent an email like, hey, I'm looking to be hired by your company. I put together a cover sheet and a resume. My manager where I worked at the time actually helped me because she knew how much I liked this work, and she was awesome. So she helped me refine my resume. I sent it in off cycle. They weren't hiring anybody. I stayed in touch with the gatekeeper. I sent before and after pictures, sent him my story and all the other stuff. And then probably a year later, out of the blue, I get a phone call. Like, hey, this is Precision Nutrition. We're looking to hire another coach, and you're at the top of our list. We'd like to interview you. So I went through that interview process, and then they're like, you're our number one choice. Can you start next week? I went and gave my week notice and never looked back. I would have retired from that place that I was before. It was a great place to work. Really, just really was. So nothing. As a matter of fact, I would go back there if I had to. Like if I had no other choice, I would happily go back there.
But PN's doing all right there. Yeah,
I'm not. But so that was like lightning struck there, and I got in, and I was kind of joke like, I'm thankful, but in a joking way, I'd say like on paper, you should have hired 100 other people before me.
Right.
Because there are people that wanted the job. Like still now, we get people like looking for the job, like PhDs and RDs and people that have been nurses. We've had former physicians try to apply. Like on paper, all these people would blow me out of the water, right?
Right.
But PN has always, especially back then, done a really good job of finding people that really fit with their mission. I happen to be one of them.
Yeah, I think that there's something that can't be replicated, a lived experience that really can't be replicated in a textbook, that gives a level of understanding when you encounter and work with people that maybe, people can still be empathetic and caring and compassionate, but have that lived experience, just it brings another level of connection. And I think ultimately going through the transformation process for the majority of people, if they're looking to lose weight and to change their health, there needs to be some kind of human connection, because it's never just about head knowledge here. There's so much going on inside that you need to sort of facilitate people going through this process, to witness, to validate, to honor them as they go through this. Was there anyone in particular that helped, that was a big help or inspiration to you as you were going through this?
Yeah. So like I said, my friend Tommy, like he was really a big catalyst in the whole thing for me, seeing that he had done this and what the success that he had. And it was kind of gave me hope, like, hey, like this guy's like my twin. I can do this. Right. Even if like you listen to his story, like it's uncannily similar. And so that he was a big piece of that. And I think a lot of, and like externally, he was a big piece. The more of the rest of it was just like me, that whole thing that happened with my friend and my son, and me just wanting to not feel like I was worthless anymore, because that's how I felt for a long time.
Yeah, I think that's really, really powerful. And as we kind of just wind up here, and I've really enjoyed hearing your story. It's nice to get to know a little bit more of Dom outside of PN, because most of my interactions with you have been through or facilitated by PN, which I'm grateful for. But I appreciate you being just open and sharing your story. How did you get through the difficult times? Because sometimes we look at this transformation and think like this was, once you're on this path, it was just kind of like blah, 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 blah. But I'm sure there's been some ups and downs in there. And what I say that, but
you're right. We don't really, it's a great point. It's a great question. We don't really do it justice, because we kind of cruise through. It was like, oh, okay, I did this, then this. And you're right. There was a lot, man. There's a lot of falling down, especially like I said, that first 6 months when I first started doing it, it was super hard. Like there were times where it was like, I don't know if I could do this. Do I want to do this? I've got composition notebooks. That's where I used to write down all the stuff from my workouts, and I would plan my food and stuff. I've got stacks of those things. And like, I look back there and I see the notes, and it was like, didn't work out today, hungover, doubled up the next day. Right. Like, had a party, ate the best I could, wasn't the best choices. Like, I'll get back at it next time. There were lots of notes in there like that. Again, I think it comes back to the thing that got me through it. I didn't care about the weight. I stepped on the scale once every 3 months. That's it. Back then. What I was more concerned about, and knowing what I know now, like how lucky I am that my mind landed in this place is pretty good. But like like I said earlier, I told myself, I'm going to do the best I can following this plan for a year. I don't care about the outcome. I want to do this for a year and see where it lands. I know it will work. It worked for my buddy. It'll work for me.
Yeah.
And that was it. That's what got me through a lot of it, was just show up and do the best I can today.
I love that. There's a previous guest that I interviewed on the show, and she went through a very, very serious illness that had her paralyzed and in a hospital bed and on a ventilator and having to relearn to breathe. And there was taped on like the ceiling of the hospital room, "You can try again tomorrow." And it was just, and she's this crazy, cool, inspirational story, but it was just this idea of you can try again tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I think this is why I want to share people's stories, is because just like you said there, this is the last thing I wanted to just touch on before we close out with some words of wisdom, but just that you saw yourself in Tommy's story, and that opened your mind to the idea, this is possible for me because I've seen someone in a very similar situation do this. Mm-hmm. So that proves to me that I can. And that's why I want to share stories, is because
it just gave me goosebumps.
Yeah. So as we wind up here, I always ask my guests, anyone listening to this, if they were just to take, if you could have them just take, one kind of nugget of wisdom away from this, I know it's hard to often condense it down to one thing, but just really one nugget of wisdom you'd like people to take away, what would that be?
Wow. That is hard for me. You know me, because you know this is hard. Because I'll give you 5.
We'll open it up to 3.
I think that the number one thing is play the long game. Play the long game. Even when I coach people now, I will not coach people for less than 6 months. I do 6 months or a year. You have to play the long game if you want to make this kind of change for many different reasons. Right. So I think that's the number one important thing. Like, thinking that you're going to make a massive change in 3 months or 30 days or 60 days, and then that you're going to ride that out for the rest of your life is fool's gold. It's not true. Yeah. You need to play the long game. And in that, you need to know that there will be a lot of falling down. There is a lot of falling down. Be okay with that. Know that that's part of it. Don't compare yourself and your journey to anybody else's in terms of outcomes. Play the long game. That's what I would say. Like, just I can't emphasize that enough. Say, I'm going to do the best I can at whatever you choose to do for 6 months, 12 months. Yeah. And that's it. That's it. If there was a mathematical formula, it would be like doing the right things times frequency over time.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah. Play the long game.
That's really what it takes. That's really what it takes. Like I said, from multiple different levels. I don't want to go too far deep, but we know, right, from the trans-theoretical model of change, for any change to move beyond the maintenance phase, you have to be doing that thing for 6 months or more. So just from the research alone about change, if you're not doing this thing for 6 months or more, you're likely to really backslide. And I think that's the biggest downfall that people have when you see people diet and exercise aren't really effective in the long term. No, it is effective in the long term, but people don't run them for the long term. That is the difference, in my opinion.
Yeah. It just reminds me of a clip that I saw recently. 6 months sounds like a long time unless someone says to you, you have 6 months to live. Context matters.
Yeah. So much.
And if you want to, if you want to have many, many years of life ahead of you, you got to think beyond 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. So,
play the long game. Know that there's going to be bumps in the road. You're going to fall down. Just keep going.
Yeah.
And I think the last piece there is man, there's so much. I just cut yourself some slack.
Yeah.
Being hard on yourself doesn't help. People think it does. I mean, you can be honest with yourself, but beating yourself up, that's a different story. So if you maybe don't follow your plan for a day, don't beat yourself up. Like you said, there's tomorrow. You could do it again tomorrow. Try again tomorrow. Do the best you can the next day. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I speak about just compassionate awareness. So we can't hide from the reality of our situation. It doesn't help. But from a former self-loathing individual who hated himself, you can't beat your way into health, a healthy body, a healthy mind, a healthy life. It's never going to happen.
You have to make it. You have to just do the little things that fit in the context of your life, not someone else's, not some ideal plan. What works for you for a longer period of time until these things become skills that you acquire and they become habitual, right? Like I said, now, like people that meet me now, if I tell them I was 300 pounds, they're like, what? Like, no way. Because I look very different. I look athletic now. But that's because that's what I do. I made that part of who I am and what I do. I have a gym in my basement, right? I like the gym. I always have. Like if I'm not doing some kind of resistance training 3 to 4 times a week, I'm not I'm not happy. Right? Yeah. And so that was something that changed as well. I really fell in love with doing things like that.
Yeah. Maybe that's a piece of advice number 3. If you don't love it, it's going to be hard to stick with it. And so maybe through the process, just figure out what is it that really you enjoy.
But I think part of that process too, though, is understanding that if you right size it at first, if you don't like it and you make it so it's manageable for you now, that grows. Like I said, I didn't like the exercise before. I didn't like it at all. I hated it. Yeah. I love it. Like, this is the thing now. It was like, I can do this. I can do a pull-up. I can climb things. Like, holy cow, I can jump. I'm fat. I'm actually not super slow anymore. I'm not fast, but like these are all things. Like, when you start discovering them, it's like I felt like a little kid again. So those things will come, but you can't bite off more than you can chew at first. That's part of it. Yeah.
Well, Dom, it's been a pleasure just getting to explore more of your story. Appreciate you sharing, being vulnerable, and sharing these stories. This will hopefully touch and inspire somebody else to make a much needed change in their life as well. So thanks for being on today.
Thank you for having me. I hope it does. And, for anybody that does listen to this, I hope you find some nuggets here that are useful to you, and just believe in yourself, and don't trust the process, engage in the process.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Between the Before and After. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a review, because that helps this podcast to reach and inspire more people. I love exploring the stories that take place between the before and after, the powerful experiences that shape who we become, and I love human potential. I love the possibilities that lie within us. So whatever you may be up against, I hope these stories inspire you, because if you're still here, your story's not done yet, so keep moving forward.